Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show. It's Tuesday. It's time to talk playoffs. Bill, we're not that far away. 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing actual reaction to the playoff committee. They meet on Tuesday nights. They'll start doing that on November 4th. And when we do that, then we're going to be here. We were talking about the format today, but we're going to be here giving our opinions about playoff brackets, but then also reacting to what the committee is actually doing starting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we will be live reacting to it, and then you will see the live reaction to it probably shortly after that show ends. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that because I don't know about you. Like, I feel like this is getting more difficult to project the playoff field. I feel like with more games, it should be easier. We should have more clarity, but I feel like every week I sit down to do it, and it's harder and harder to figure out which 11 teams are going to go in those FBS spots.
We are actually doing the more difficult thing because we are trying to predict what actually is going to be the playoff bracket at the end of the year. So we are sort of going by what's happening right now, but also anticipating, okay, well, who do we think is going to be good? And then you've got to try to factor in who's going to lose. And you don't want to go too crazy with that. It is a little easier to say, this is what I think now. But as we were talking about this, obviously, after the only two that really matter, I'm not one of those people who thinks that you shouldn't have them during the year. You should only do it once. It's a sport. It's supposed to be fun. It's something to talk about. I don't think it ruins anything. But the only two that really matter, the only one that really matters, obviously, is the final one. But then the next most important one is the first one because it gives you the initial idea of like, oh, that's what they think of Georgia Tech, or, oh, that's what they think of Indiana. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to figure that out. And then that's going to influence our projected brackets because we're going to realize, oh man, what the committee is telling us at the moment is there's no way the ACC's getting 2, or what the committee is telling us is like, yeah, baby, 7 for the SEC is alive and healthy, no matter how much we might hate it. Their rankings are telling us it's possible. So like, that's the kind of thing that we'll figure out a couple weeks from now.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to monitor, like, whether or not we think any of their thought process has changed, like after 1 year of doing this, right? With all the noise we had in the off season about the SEC and strength of schedule and Indiana last year. I'm just interested to see if any of that feels like it has seeped its way into the actual playoff conversation.
Yeah. So bunch of losses last week that certainly affected everybody's look at the playoff picture. 3 undefeated teams lost. Number 2, Miami lost. Texas Tech, everyone's team in the Big 12, lost. And Ole Miss lost to Georgia in a game that I picked Ole Miss to win. And so, like, there's a couple teams, like, again, this part of some chunk of what we do here, both in our playoff show on Tuesday nights and in our Friday pick show, is just me, like, just having to, like, look at reality and hating every part of it and being like, I guess Alabama and Georgia are good. But I just can't. I accept neither Georgia nor Alabama at this point, but they keep winning. And so at some point it matters. And Georgia beating Ole Miss mattered. And then, by the way, you go to like the success rate matchups, like by that, like Georgia dominated, right? So it's like, it wasn't like Georgia had a fluky win over Ole Miss, no matter how much I don't like it.
You think every Georgia win's a fluky win? Yeah. That's all right. You're true to who you are.
You don't want to know how many SEC teams I have in this week. Actually, you do want to know. Let's get to the rankings. Let's get to my playoff bracket, and we'll talk about it. I hate myself.
That's interesting because I lowered my number of SEC.
Okay. Is the Big Ten nightmare scenario coming any more true in your mind, or no?
Well, I was worried about getting 2. So no, I don't know that we're any closer to that. I don't think.
Okay.
But it does feel like Big Ten's getting 3, and that's probably it.
Okay.
Unless Michigan goes on a run.
I have all the stuff here. Like, there's so many 2-loss teams in the Big Ten, and I have like who they've beaten, who they still have to play, who we think might emerge from that. But let me give you my rankings first. Number 1, Ohio State. That hasn't changed. I do think the thing that happened, and it's my fault. And why do I talk about college football? I should just shut my hole and wait for things to happen, because I was like, I think we might have 4 undefeated champions. And then Texas Tech and Miami were like, nope. So the thing that I think that has happened that you and I have danced with is like the SEC not getting a bye. And that's dead now. because the SEC not getting a bye, the only scenario for that was like undefeated ACC champ, undefeated Big 12 champ, and 2 undefeated teams playing in the Big 10 championship game, and then both of them getting byes. So that's out. So I have Texas A&M as the 2 seed now. The SEC champ can rest easy. They're getting a bye. Yes?
Yeah. No doubt about it now. Yes.
Okay. All right. Ohio State 1, Texas A&M 2, Indiana 3. I had Indiana 5 last week, and sort of that same thing of, okay, Miami and Texas Tech, undefeated champs from the Big 12 and the ACC. So Indiana as the Big 10 championship game loser in my scenario, back to number 3. I still have Miami 4. And we can talk about that. Now that's Miami as a 1-loss ACC champ. And probably that now we're talking about if the ACC or Big 12 champ like runs the table from now on, or BYU still undefeated, right? Georgia Tech still undefeated. That could still happen. If there's a 1-loss Big 12 or ACC champ, now they're going head to head with like the loser of the SEC title game for the last playoff spot, last bye, right? Is that how we would see that?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Okay. So like in my scenario at the moment, I have Miami getting it because I have Miami 4, I have Alabama 5, Oregon 6, Georgia Tech 7, Notre Dame 8, Texas Tech 9 as the Big 12 champ. That low. The Big 12 could really get a little crazy here. And I want to talk about the team that like we have to talk about. And I want to talk about in the Big 12 because otherwise the North is not going to be represented enough. So we want to talk about them at least a little bit in a moment. 10 Georgia, 11 Oklahoma, 12 South Florida. So I no longer, I had Texas and Washington in last week. I have replaced them with Georgia and Oklahoma because Georgia beat Ole Miss and Texas looked like garbage against Kentucky, and Washington lost to Michigan. So I really stared at, okay, that is Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, all in from the SEC. And then it was like, can I get a 4th Big 10 team in? It's like, no, I have to give the 4th team to the SEC for now. Because the other thing we talked about is we thought Notre Dame USC was a little bit maybe for that spot. Like it's Notre Dame versus the Big 10 for the 4th Big 10 spot, and Notre Dame beat USC. And that's going to affect a lot of things there because USC beat Michigan and Illinois beat USC. So Notre Dame beating USC affects. YouTube, I said it was a mispronunciation of effects. Don't give us the old.
But also appropriate for the situation. Yeah.
Effects, right? That makes it a little bit harder for that 4th Big 10 team because Notre Dame got a really good win. So, and then South Florida 12 still hanging on to South Florida as the Group of 5 team. So 2 new teams for me.
South Florida Memphis is this week, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So Washington and Texas out for me from last week. Georgia and Oklahoma in. Anything crazy you hear there? Anything like, oh my God?
No, I don't. We have similar thought processes. I think I actually only ended up dropping 1 team from last week, but I did like rearrange the board a little bit. But you have Texas Tech as the Big 12 champ playing a road game as a 9 seed. Did I hear that?
Yes, right? Yes, because that's sort of like. So we can talk about Texas Tech. So Texas Tech lost to Arizona State with its backup quarterback.
Yeah.
So I think the committee actually will take that into consideration some, but also it doesn't matter what the committee's taking into consideration on some level because the Big 12 probably isn't getting 2. And this scenario to me is that maybe there's a jam up of like Texas Tech emerges somehow from, and I don't know what the tiebreakers are, but that's like a 2-loss Texas Tech Big 12 champ. That at least one team with 2 conference losses at least. Last year they had a 4-way tie, right in the Big 12, and they had to pick. It was a 4-way tie with 2 conference losses, right? It wasn't a 4-way tie with 1 conference loss, was it?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So like in that scenario, what are you going to do with a 2-loss Big 12 champ? And yes, I have them that low. I have them 9. So
yeah, I think if that's a 2-loss champ, you're probably right. I think if it's a 1-loss Big 12 champ, they're getting a home game.
I think that's right. And it's a fair distinction because I think that's like a worthy distinction to make, that like the difference between 7 and 8 is not that big of a deal, but the difference between 8 and 9 is gigantic. And it's like, hey, like in the room, even if they're not supposed to talk about it, or I could see them talking about it, like, hey, like this is a conference champ. Like, what are we doing here that, we're sending them on the road, right? So like last year, Arizona State as the 2-loss Big 12 champ last year in the actual rankings was 12th at the end of the year. So this is to have Texas Tech 9th, right? And again, like the actual ACC champ last year, Clemson was 16th, and the ACC runner-up was 10th. Right? No ACC team, no Big 12 team was higher than 10th last year. So like we know what that looks like, Bill. So like that's kind of what I'm sort of anticipating happening there.
Yeah, I could see it happening, but I also will say that like I was just like looking at the Big 12 and what teams have left, and the fact that Texas Tech lost that game close to Arizona State with its backup quarterback. I actually feel like that loss didn't do a whole lot to shake up the Big 12 race. I kind of like Texas Tech still plays BYU. That's a banger. But if you look at the rest of Texas Tech's schedule, it's pretty easy. It might be like the easiest remaining schedule of like all the Big 12 contenders. They play Oklahoma State, Kansas State, West Virginia, and UCF. In addition to BYU, like I don't see a world where they're worse than 10-2, and BYU seems like it's playing with a little bit of a horseshoe up its butt. I don't know if they're going to get through the whole season undefeated either. So I in my mind, like, yes, Texas Tech has a loss now. You knock them down a peg, but I still think they're kind of going to run away with the Big 12.
Kyle Whittingham, man, I don't know what Utah coach Kyle Whittingham was doing last week. I thought Utah was going to roll in that game, and they just kept going for it on 4th down and not making it. Again, you go to like the success rate breakdown. It's like Utah's success rate was so much better than BYU's, and Kyle Whittingham like coached them out of the game. The game that really is now we're on red alert for, I think, obviously Texas Tech BYU was huge, but there's only 2 undefeated conference teams in the Big 12. It's BYU and Cincinnati, and they play at Cincinnati on November 22nd.
Yeah.
And that could be a play-in game for the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, it could be. I didn't game it out entirely, but obviously you look at that because there are the 2 unbeatens left. There's a group, so there's 2 unbeaten teams. There's 3 teams with 1 loss, but those teams don't play each other a bunch the rest of the year. So there's 5 teams, and there's only 6 games between those 5 teams the rest of the year, which I don't think is that many. So like it does feel like there's a pretty big I don't know, the top half of the Big 12 I think is like could probably beat anybody in the top half for the most part, but once you get below that, there's like ways to pad your resume I think in that conference, and it seems like a lot of these teams are going to get the chance to do that, which just help with how their schedules break out the rest of the year. So yeah, Cincinnati BYU is huge. I like, I'll admit, not knowing as much as I should know about the sport, didn't realize how good Houston was. But Houston is very much in the thick of the Big 12 race, and like they play Arizona State, and they have like a fairly manageable schedule besides that, right? So I don't know. I think Texas Tech is going to go there to the Big 12 title game, but you could convince me like any other one of about 6 or so teams could be the team that plays Texas Tech in that game.
Cincinnati's offense has the best success rate in the Big 12, and nationally, the offenses that are ahead of them are Vanderbilt, USC, Indiana, Ohio State, and Navy. Like they are a really good offensive team, right? And Brendan Sorsby's
best quarterback in the Big 12,
well.
Right? Yeah,
and, I mean, it's like so, like it's real. Doesn't mean they're going to definitely go to the Big 12 championship game, but I don't. There's no, and now again, like Nebraska, although Nebraska's had a bad loss to Minnesota, like again that. They played Nebraska to 1 score in Kansas City in the opener. And it's actually funny, like we'll get into the Big Ten stuff a little bit, but when you start talking about like who really has a chance to like get to 10-2 in the Big Ten, that was a bad loss at Minnesota for Nebraska, right? Like really bad. But if they can use that for like like that's bottoming out. I know Dylan Raiola got sacked 9 times. I'm not saying I think this is going to happen, but if they do, like when you get into the mix of things, that's like the second best non-conference win in the Big Ten. Actually, it might be the best. I was going to say it's the second best non-conference win for a Big Ten team behind Ohio State over Texas, but Cincinnati's ranked ahead of Texas. It might be the best non-conference win in the Big Ten. And if Nebraska, like a 10-2 Nebraska with a win over a Cincinnati team that's in the Big 12 title game, or a win over a Cincinnati team that's in the playoff, that is incredibly propulsive for Nebraska. And when you're looking for like the 4th Big Ten team and what can you hang it on, right? Well, Michigan lost to Oklahoma. Like they kind of had their chance. USC lost to Notre Dame. They kind of had their chance. Illinois beat Duke, but this Cincinnati win, that's better than what Illinois did beating Duke. And by the way, Illinois has a 50-point loss on its resume that it's going to have to try to overcome. So like you go through and like, it's just interesting to me. I don't even we're the I was going to call us the king to the north. We love Northern college football, and in the moment, I certainly did not anticipate that Nebraska Cincinnati could matter at the end of the year as much as it might when we saw it on the first weekend of the season.
Yeah, it's crazy too if you think about like how that game ended, right? It was 20-17, and Cincinnati is driving to go win the game, and Brendan Sorsby, he has 3 turnover-worthy plays and 1 interception, and his 1 interception is with 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter against Nebraska on like a ball he should not have thrown, and they had plenty of time to go win that game. And it's like the only mistake he's made all year. But it's like not impossible. Like I don't know, Cincinnati getting BYU at home, they can win that game. They have to play at Utah. And they play TCU, but based off what it's done so far, like I don't know. I guess I could see Cincinnati like running the table in the Big 12, and then we're gonna look up at the end of the year and realize that they're one Sorsby YOLO ball at the end of the Nebraska game from being undefeated.
So I will say it feels like, and we'll get to your rankings here, but to me it's like Miami and Texas Tech both lost last week, but I didn't drop them out of my playoff picture. All I did was drop their seeding as a result, which matters, which of course matters. It's like, the regular season doesn't. It's like that really matters. Like Miami and Texas Tech just made their paths harder if they do get to the playoff by losing these games that people didn't expect them to lose. There still are consequences for losses. There are very few consequence-free losses, right? Everything matters. Oregon losing to Indiana, it's probably going to cost Oregon a bye, right? Like that kind of thing really matters. So anyway, I didn't knock them out. Let's get to your rankings and see if those Miami and Texas Tech losses affected you.
Yeah, they affected me some, but they're still in the field for me. So I have number 1 Ohio State still. I moved Indiana up to 2 because just the thought that we're not going to have a bunch of undefeated conference champs, and I think that's going to be undefeated versus undefeated in the Big 12 title game. So the loser will merely
Big
fall
10
to
title
2.
game, yeah.
Big 10 title game, excuse me. I have Alabama 3 as the SEC champ.
Okay.
This is probably the biggest change for me. I have Georgia Tech as the 4 seed now as my ACC champ.
Love it.
I had not even had them in previously.
Welcome. And I don't want to say that I've had Georgia Tech in from week 1 because I actually dropped them out after the first week, but I did have Georgia Tech in the preseason. And I believe in the rec. I believe in the rec. They've been working their way up. But so they've also they have a bit of a horseshoe up their butt. There's only 6 undefeated teams remaining. And so like credit to all of them, right? The 6 undefeated teams remaining, see if I can name off the top of my head, right? Or Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, BYU, Georgia Tech, and Navy.
I think that's right. Yep.
So I think that's right. So incredible credit to Georgia Tech, but it did not make me think that Georgia Tech will beat Miami in the ACC title game, which is what my ACC title game would be at the moment.
Yeah, I don't. That's probably fair. They're going to be their style of play. I think lends itself to closer games. But yeah, they close with Colorado, close with Clemson, overtime with Wake Forest, who's not good, close with Duke this past weekend, somewhat close. But like they're going to be favored. They have 4 ACC games left. They're going to be favored in all of them.
Yeah.
So like I think they're going to the ACC championship. So
I agree.
I'll predict them to beat Miami. So I have Georgia Tech at 4. Texas A&M is 5 as my SEC runner-up.
Okay.
I have Oregon 6th, 3rd Big 10 team. Texas Tech, Big 12 champ, 7. I have Georgia as the 3rd SEC team, number 8.
Okay.
Miami, 2nd ACC team at 9.
Okay.
Notre Dame at 10.
Okay.
Oklahoma at 11. And South Florida at 12.
So I'm looking here, and I think we might have all the same teams.
Yeah, I think we just have them like in a different order.
Yeah, because like I've finally come around on Georgia and Alabama reluctantly, and you have now joined the Georgia Tech hive, and so we're 12 for 12. So there you have it.
Means this will happen.
Lock it in.
I was a little torn. Like I was thinking to myself, like this could end up being a really interesting conversation if it's how it plays out. So like Notre Dame at 10-2, and as I was gaming out the SEC a little bit, like I have Oklahoma at 10-2, and I have Vanderbilt at 10-2. and I wasn't
Oh,
sure exactly how that would sort itself out. I put in Oklahoma because Oklahoma, I like the resume with Oklahoma and Vanderbilt within the SEC is actually quite similar. Oklahoma lost to Texas. I like projected a loss to Texas for Vanderbilt. They have a lot of the same
okay.
wins, but Oklahoma has the win against Michigan, and Vanderbilt's like big non-conference win is Virginia Tech, who fired its coach. So that was like enough for me to give Oklahoma that spot. But like it did get me wondering a little bit if we talked about Notre Dame versus the Big Ten, and it seems like it's now cleared that hurdle by beating USC. Could it still find itself in a Notre Dame versus SEC battle if there's a couple 10-2 SEC teams?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd sleep well if I were Marcus Freeman, if that's the case.
I mean, I do. I think Notre Dame's in pretty good shape considering where they were. I think nothing's guaranteed. I think they're in pretty good shape. But to wonder about a 10-2 versus 10-2 showdown again, where a lot's gonna rest on like, well, does Boise State wind up as the Mountain West champ, and like how does that affect like that win for Notre Dame, and how does USC end the season, right?
Yep.
Pitt's 5-2, and they're still on Notre Dame's schedule. And so there's something that I want to talk about, though. So the hard thing, so Miami, let's talk about this is a Miami show. So last year, Miami was 10-1 and 6-1 going to Syracuse in the last weekend of the regular season. If they had beaten Syracuse, they would have gone to the ACC title game and like almost assuredly made the playoff, I think, because SMU was favored in that Big 12 title game and lost and still made the playoff. So if Miami had been 11-1 and gone to the ACC title game and lost to SMU, I think they still might have made it. But then they didn't make the ACC title game and then didn't make the playoff. So the point is, Miami they lost to Georgia Tech, was their early loss, right, to make them 10-1, 6-1 before they lost to Syracuse. This is Miami's schedule the rest of the way. Stanford, who's 3-4, at SMU, who's 5-2, Syracuse, who is 3-4, NC State, who's 4-3, at Virginia Tech, who's 2-5, and at 5-2 Pitt on the last weekend of the regular season. The schedule makers consecutive years are making Miami come north on the last Saturday in November to end the regular season. Now, last year it was in a dome, so it didn't matter, but they lost because Kyle McCord chucked it all over on them. Pitt's decent. Now, Pitt also was good for the first half last year and fell apart. If Pitt doesn't fall apart, like part of me is like, well, okay, they lost. It was at home, but Louisville and Jeff Brom, like everyone wants Jeff Brom now for an SEC job. Jeff Brom's a good coach. You saw what he did at Purdue. Yeah. It's like I'm almost on a Friday night, like even though it was at home, like I'm almost a little disappointed not to have.
Louisville can get to the ACC title game.
They could. Like, what should we have sniffed out that loss for Miami instead of me being like 12-0, baby? Like that now in retrospect, it's like, that's not a crazy loss. No. But do you trust Miami? Do you trust Mario Cristobal like to run this? And it's already it's preemptively hilarious to me that they could once again be 10-1, 6-1 in the ACC, come north on the last weekend of the regular season, and to lose to one of our northern ACC teams.
Yeah, I mean at SMU, I think could be tricky, and I think the Pitt game could be tricky. The rest of the schedule, probably not. You're playing a team that already fired its coach, a team that wants to fire its coach, a team that's playing with its backup quarterback, and a team that has an interim coach at Stanford. Yeah. So, like, you should get 4 wins there, and it's a matter of do you beat SMU and Pitt? I could absolutely see Miami doing that, but the thing that's different, like say, if they lose again, but it's not a loss that keeps them out of the ACC title game, which is possible, I think they're probably fine, because the other thing that was working against them last year is like they didn't have any good wins. They didn't play a single ranked team last year, and this year they have a win over Notre Dame and they have a win over South Florida. So like I think 10-2 Miami is probably still in the playoff.
But then if they don't win the ACC, then so you're saying if they 10-2 Miami, that makes the ACC title game or doesn't make the ACC title game?
That does make the ACC title game, I think. Okay. If they don't, I think they're sweating it out a little bit.
Because then it's one of the because then they can't be 10-2 Miami. They're either 11-2 Miami, who wins the ACC and is in automatically, or they're 10-3 Miami, but are they not penalized for the loss the way SMU wasn't penalized for the loss last year, right?
And Notre Dame over them. You're not going to
right.
they would knock out Notre Dame.
That could be a really interesting head-to-head. Yeah, keep your eye on Louisville. Louisville's only conference losses in overtime to Virginia. They're 5-1. Boston College, Virginia Tech, Cal, Clemson, SMU to end the season, and then Kentucky in a non-conference game. Like, keep your eye on Louisville too. Keep your eye on Louisville. Let's talk about Big Ten though. So just real quick on the Big Ten, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Big Ten teams currently with 2 overall losses. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing overall losses for your playoff resume. So all those teams have 5 games left. Here are how many games they play against other 2-loss teams or one of the big 3 of Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. Okay. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, and it's just funny, and it's just like people don't care about this, but my daughter's a senior at Northwestern. She would love to go watch Northwestern play in a bowl game. Northwestern is 5-2. All 5 of their remaining games are against other 2-loss teams right now. Yeah. So they have like banger. So Northwestern, all 5 of their games, Nebraska, USC, Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois. Like there's not a guaranteed win in there. It's like all right. And so, hey, it's Northwestern's 5-2. And it's like, yeah, but they could really use a Wisconsin in there in the second half of the season. They don't have it. So all 5 of theirs are. USC has 3 games against other 2-loss teams and an Oregon game. Iowa has 3 games against other 2-loss teams and an Oregon game. Nebraska has 3 games against 2-loss teams. Minnesota has 2 games against 2-loss teams and an Oregon game. Illinois has 2 games against 2-loss teams, and Washington has 1 game against a 2-loss team and an Oregon game, and Michigan has 1 game against a 2-loss team and an Ohio State game. So, like Illinois, it has to beat Washington and Northwestern, but has like and it's a huge game this weekend. And we'll talk about it on the Friday pick show. Illinois at Washington is huge for the Big Ten, but like you can see Illinois' way to 10-2. Nebraska has Northwestern, USC, Iowa, but like you can see their way to 10-2, right? They just got to get their stuff together.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, and I saw Brett Bielema this week, like talking about how they could have a compelling playoff resume because they only lost to number 1 and number 2. I think losing by the margin they lost is prohibitive. Like, I don't think they're getting a sniff at 10-2 because of how much they lost to Indiana by.
Albatross. Yeah. Right. We're back to the albatross range. And like, unless
Duke go to the playoff,
unless Duke wins the ACC. Right. So like it is, which is not going to happen. So like, I agree with that. Right. That's probably the worst 10-2 case in the Big Ten. What actually, I think like the case to get a 4th Big Ten team in is probably one of these 2-loss teams wins out to go 10-2, but it's one of the 2-loss teams that has Oregon on the schedule. And if USC is 10-2 with a win over Oregon, if Iowa is, if Minnesota is, if Washington is, right? That's in. You're 10-2 and one of your wins is Oregon. And then it's like, oh no, 10-2 Oregon. Oregon, who lost to Indiana and now lost to this other team, are we sure they're in? But Oregon's current stature in the sport, if they're blowing everybody out along the way, like, would you feel good about their chance, or are you now down to point me to Oregon's best win? Well, here's the other thing, though. No, here's the other thing. We're talking about they have 4 games against 2-loss teams the rest of the way. So if they lose to Washington, but they have wins over Minnesota, Iowa, and USC, and Minnesota, Iowa, and USC are all like 8-win teams, 9-win teams, I actually think 10-2 Oregon's in. But Oregon has a bunch of like tougher games than you realize, and Oregon sort of and now this brings us back to is the Big Ten too top heavy for its own good? If Oregon finishes 11-1 with wins over all those teams, probably a 4th Big Ten team's not getting in. If they lose one of those games, I think they're almost certainly probably still in, but the team that beat them is probably in too.
I don't know. I guess I would. It depends on how many 10-2 teams there are. Like, how many 10-2 teams is the SEC spitting out?
But now
the answer could be like 3 or 6.
But why are wins over Tennessee and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt and LSU and South Carolina better than wins over Minnesota, Iowa, and USC?
I don't think that they are, but I'm not naive enough to believe they won't be viewed that way.
I am. I'm naive enough.
Like, I love to live in the world that you live in. I don't think it's an automatic. I think it'd be a really uncomfortable spot, because then a 10-2 Oregon with a loss to Washington, you're trying to convince people that your best win is a Penn State team that then lost to UCLA and Northwestern after you beat them, like, and then fired their coach, right? I don't know. I think they're probably fine because I don't know that I'm super convinced that the SEC is going to spit out 6-10 win teams. But that's kind of the nightmare scenario. It's like you're 10-2 Oregon with not really anything in the way of a good win being compared to like Oklahoma, Georgia, Vanderbilt with 10 wins. And I don't know that I'd want to be doing that.
So this is, how I do this, right? I get in fights with people. So like the Wall Street Journal wrote a story after Saturday's games, like the SEC is eating its own or something like that.
Right.
And so like I quote tweeted that story and said like alternate headline, the SEC is mid. And then like one of the authors of the story for the Wall Street Journal, who's a very good college football writer, Rachel Bachman, like responded to my thing. It was like, well, what about this? And what about the AP rankings? And then I was like, well, the AP rankings are not to be used that way because they're not good enough to be like, well, but the SEC has 9 teams in the top 25 and the Big Ten has 4. It's like, I don't care. That is not what AP rankings are to be used for. Like they are not evidence of anything in the moment. They are historical markers. They are not like the end all be all, right? Because like we should know that. So my point though here is like the idea that the SEC is eating itself. Like I don't think that's wrong, but the Big Ten is also eating itself alive. Because Illinois over USC, USC over Michigan, Michigan over Washington, right? All of that's the same thing. Like the same thing is happening. Like, hey, Nebraska, we think you think Nebraska has an inside line to a playoff. And it's like, yeah, Minnesota has something to say about that. Does that mean Nebraska stinks? No, I think they played a bad game. They have problems. They're not perfect, but Minnesota's pretty darn good. Now, the other thing is like, well, it sure would have helped if Minnesota hadn't lost to Cal. But also, like, Cal in the moment can be decent, and like Coy Parrish kicked a punt return, and like stuff happens. But it's and also Ole Miss should have lost to Washington State. So it's just like one of those things. Correct. What matters and what doesn't. My overall point of this is, and you are right to say, I'm probably naive to think it. Both these leagues are eating themselves equally. But the issue is that the Big Ten has more good teams at the top. And if Oregon just puts its foot down and says, that's it, we're not losing anymore. Indiana, all these 2-loss teams, Indiana doesn't play any of them down the stretch. Indiana plays all the bad teams the rest of the way in the Big Ten. And the only one that Ohio State plays is Michigan. So Ohio State and Indiana kind of aren't going to matter in this picture very much. The only thing that Ohio State matters is if Michigan beats Ohio State. Now all of a sudden you have 10-2 Michigan with an Ohio State win. They're in for sure.
They both play UCLA though. You're forgetting that.
But it's like one of those things. It's like, so like, but UCLA's defense, but UCLA has 4 losses. So like UCLA's not making the playoff, but now they're probably just good enough now
to make the Big Ten championship. Up. They control their own destiny to get to Indianapolis. Just saying.
I'm done covering college football. I can't live in a world where the Big Ten champ lost to New Mexico. I cannot live in that world. 0-3 in the preseason, and then you win the Big Ten title. I don't care how good of a story is. I can't. Like every person, every Mississippi State fan in the country is going to be in my Twitter mentions, and I just can't. I'd have to stop.
We need Sig to take care of business this weekend. Is what we need.
Why would you even bring that? Good luck to UCLA. Why would you do that?
It's just very funny if you look at the Big Ten standings and like who's in the top, like Northwestern and UCLA and Maryland, I think are all in the top half, and like Penn State's way at the bottom. Illinois is like in the middle. Yeah. Nebraska's at the bottom.
Because it is like you can go through it. It's like, well, guess what? UCLA lost to UNLV. UNLV's pretty good. And UCLA lost to Utah. Utah actually is pretty good, but they gave a game away against BYU, right? But then it's like they lost to New Mexico too. So like, okay. This is not good for my health. Those are our playoffs. Anything else to say about this? What do you guys say?
Well, I'm just curious. Like this is not like the end all be all. I just like, as I'm formulating my thoughts for this, I do like to take a peek at like, there's so many charts, so many college football charts on a Monday and Tuesday if you're perusing Twitter, but like the four quadrants, right? The EPA per play. It's just interesting the way it breaks down because there's not like, obviously there are 3 very complete teams in the Big Ten, but like also Michigan is like in the complete team tier, and Washington's like butting right up against it. And if you look at like the SEC, like Alabama is in there, A&M is in there, Missouri is in there, and like that's it. Tennessee is like kind of butting right up against it. Georgia is pretty close to butting up against it. But like all of Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, like profile is like good offense, bad defense teams. It's just like it's not the only way I think you should like sort of like frame your point of view on the sport, but it is an interesting snapshot as you try to figure out like exactly how good is the SEC with all these teams beating up on each other.
No, but I think in the end, like it really is. It's not like there's 11 SEC teams in a good quadrant and 3 Big Ten teams like that. It's much closer than you would say. And like there was a quadrant I was looking at, and 4 teams that had pretty similar statistical resumes in terms of like good offense, like the down to down is good, but like a defense that you have major questions about. A little foursome was Cincinnati, Washington, Tennessee, Ole Miss.
Yes.
And then just like, I think we probably looked at the same chart. Were you looking at the chart where the guy drew the circle around, these are my playoff teams in this chart?
Yes, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
Bud Davis.
You know who else is in that group? Funnily enough, is the group is like, it's like Washington, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Cincinnati, Florida State.
Oh God. So like, it's one of those things like, right. Not statistics. There's always outliers, but I guess what can end with this point is, do you think the average college football pundit thinks of Washington and Cincinnati the same way they think of Ole Miss and Tennessee?
No.
Okay. But I think you could argue based on not just that statistical correlation, but also their resume and who they've beaten and who they've lost to and what they've earned on the field. I think they're much closer than people realize. And like, if I tried to tell an SEC, oh my God, I'm trying to envision doing it. It's like trying to explain fire to a caveman. Like if you explain to an SEC pundit that Cincinnati's as good as Ole Miss, they're just going to grunt at you and hit you over the head with a stick. Like let's know what's that conversation. They're not going to believe it. They're not going to believe that it's true, even though actually I think it is true.
Do you ever play around on CFB graphs and just make hypothetical games?
No, I didn't know you could make hypothetical games. Oh, let's do a hypothetical podcast sometime.
I'm going to do it right now. You're
going to do a Cincinnati Ole Miss hypothetical game?
The projected score, CFB graphs, which is Parker Fleming, like his advanced analytics. The projected points for Ole Miss, Cincinnati. Let me do it neutral. Neutral site, Ole Miss 31, Cincinnati 28.
Okay, so it's a banger.
Yeah.
Is that what we think? But so we want
that is not what the college football world thinks.
We want to act like Georgia's a bunch of dogs for beating Ole Miss and nobody gives a crap that Nebraska beat Cincinnati. Like, that's I think that's pretty close to how people would view that. And it's like, actually beating Ole Miss and beating Cincinnati are pretty equal. So keep that in mind as you evaluate Nebraska and Georgia. I'm not saying that Nebraska should be ranked ahead of Georgia. Nebraska just had a bad loss. I'm just saying, check yourself.
So it's cfb-graphs.com and you can click on matchups and you can make any hypothetical game you want, which now I feel like this is what you're going to be doing for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I can't do any pods the rest of the week. and I'm going to cherry pick the results that I like the best. And I'm going to be like, what? Minnesota would beat Vanderbilt. Minnesota would beat Vanderbilt. If I find one of those, you're never going to hear the end of it. So
I'm looking it up right now.
I just need a little confirmation. I actually don't think, because I know Vanderbilt's offensive statistical profile is so good that I'm sure it has Vanderbilt beating Minnesota.
It does by 9 points on a neutral field.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. But I believe in CJ. Although Clark Lee's actually a good coach too. Like, I'm not going to like lead my anti-SEC stuff with Vanderbilt. It's like, good luck to Vanderbilt, but also like, are they really the 10th best team in the country for real?
How about this
like,
one? How about this? Now this is what the podcast is. Vanderbilt, Washington, 1 point.
Yeah. So this is the hard thing. I almost kept Washington after a loss to Michigan in my playoff, because I had Washington in the playoff last week. And the question is this: Washington was stopped by an excellent Ohio State defense, and then they were stopped by the Michigan defense. Damon Williams Jr. also was throwing the ball to
lost
Michigan.
His mind. Yeah, he lost his mind and gave Michigan short fields. It was 7-7, and then the game broke open.
So is it one of three things? Is it Michigan is also actually a really good defense. Yeah, they got smoked by USC the week before, but actually they're the Michigan defense that they've been. And they're closer to like a top quadrant defense that actually is not as good as Ohio State, but you could compare them in that group with Ohio State, which then means, okay, Washington's struggled to score points against two excellent defenses. Is that the outcome? Is the outcome you have any defense with a pulse and Washington's done? And so Michigan qualifies as a defense with a pulse, but they're not Ohio State, and Washington couldn't do anything with them. And it's like, okay, Washington, I've been overrating Washington. I can love talking about the Huskies, and it's a facade. They only do it against bad teams. Or the third option is a very talented young quarterback lost his mind for 10 minutes and the game completely flipped. If he doesn't lose his mind the rest of the year, Washington could go 10-2 and beat Oregon. I'm not sure. Yeah. I think all three of those would be possible. I'm not blind to the fact that maybe I'm overrating Washington, and any decent defense is going to give them a lot of trouble. I think that's certainly possible, but I might be like a third. Actually, sure. Michigan's defense is really good. Actually, Washington's offense is overrated, or actually it was a blip, because we have blips in this sport. And it was a blip that doesn't really tell you all that much about the Washington offense or the Michigan defense. And then we go back to where we were, and back to where we were is maybe Michigan, and maybe Washington has a chance to beat Oregon. Would you go a third on those three possibilities?
I would, yes. By the way, okay. Washington projected to beat Ole Miss on a neutral field.
There we go. So maybe because Washington beat Washington State by 40 and Ole Miss beat them by 7? Okay. So that's what we do on Tuesday nights. Again, we're not that far away from this being like actual conversations about real rankings. So we'll appreciate that and enjoy that when it comes. For now, thanks to you guys for being part of this. We have Ohio State's on a bye week this week, but we'll have our national picks on Friday. And we will welcome our friend Ari Wasserman from On3 to talk about the national title race on a show for Thursday here on this YouTube channel and on your podcast feed. So for now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the Bill and Doug Show.